listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
And welcome back to another edition of the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Dave Ross, Mark Dominik coming out at you on this Monday. And Mark, before we get to some of the news and notes around the league, as an executive, was this the calm? Did you get to relax as an exec this week here after a wild free agency kind of beginning to that? We're getting ready for the April draft. Was this the calm week here for executives across the league?
It's next week. And the reason why I say that is owners' meetings are next week and down in the beautiful Palm Beach, Florida, at the Breakers Hotel, which is a great getaway for 32 clubs, owners, GMs, presidents, executives. And so really next week is that 1 week where you take a breath between free agency and the draft. So we're a week away, but it's a nice getaway.
When you get down there, Mark, what type of business goes on? Is it more meet and greet again, reacclimate yourself with friends around the league? Is it more of a social gathering, or is it really work that gets done? Besides, obviously, the minutia of, say, the competition committee and potential rule changes and that sort of thing. What's the rest of that week like?
Kind of like a State of the Union for the National Football League, right? That's what it's kind of there for. You're right. I mean, a big part of it is clearly the competition committee and what they're trying to accomplish, what they're trying to look at in terms of rules or changes, trying to get a sense of the room. Remember, we really don't usually vote on things until there's at least that 24 out of 32 vote. And so, a lot of times with the competition committee, they'll take that Monday night or even Tuesday night, usually depart by Wednesday, and kind of get a sense, where are the 32 clubs sitting to decide, are we going to propose something or not? Because they hate proposing things they know are going to fail, right? No one wants to do that. So they get a really good pulse through it. So there's some handshaking, some understanding. It is a nice time, though. It is a lot of, fellowship, that kind of stuff that you get to do there. But there's certainly, I think the competition committee is probably the number one thing that you're really working on to see exactly what changes are we going to see in the 2025 season.
Oh, I don't care about the tush push. I'm not one of those guys that says you got to ban it if you can't stop it. I just say be better defensively. But if we could please, and I heard that this might be something to discuss. You and I have discussed it many times. Just take away the possibility of a tie, and I will be a happy guy. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care what the overtime rules look like in the regular season. Just no more ties. That's all I ask for. If they take care of that, Mark, I will be so happy when they come out of that competition committee. I know they said they're going to address it, but you're right. It has to be a formal introduction by a team, right, in order for that to even be tabled.
That's exactly correct. Yeah, teams have to submit, different proposals. You'll see a bunch of them. Some will never even make it to the floor. Some will get to the floor, and some will be discussed in a group. And they'll talk about the pros and the cons of it. And then it goes behind the scenes of like, do we really think there's enough teams to vote? And there's sometimes it's always just 31-1, right? It's that one team that's just like, I'm against it completely. It is what it is. But there are lots of things that get tabled. Clubs can put in obscure things or things that have relevance. Sometimes you see the same thing over and over each year, and it never gets to the floor because they're like, hey, look, we don't want to do that right now. So you just got to, resubmit it the next year. But again, the whole goal here is to let every team kind of get a sense to have a chance to speak about what's going on in 2024 and what do we need to do to improve the game in 2025.
Fascinating. I love those conversations. I'm glad those conversations at least are being had, whether they become formal proposals or not. At least we're talking about ways to possibly improve I think for the short money, the greatest game that we have going right now, certainly in the United States. It's our passion. Jameis Winston is a passionate guy, right? And we all kind of like his personality, and he's very open. We all see who Jameis is and what he's all about. He's now well-traveled, and now he's going to be going to the Giants. 2-year deal, $8 million to go to New York as the Giants quarterback. I don't know that this means he's the starting quarterback there. We're still hearing about Russell Wilson. We still don't know about Aaron Rodgers as of our conversation here on this Monday. But what do you make of famous Jameis going to the G-Man? What does that say to you?
Well, I mean, I think they looked at it from two perspectives. One, at least he brings a ton of experience. So a guy that's been under center, played a lot of games in Tampa, played some games in Cleveland. We see where the backup market number is. Like, it's $4 million a year for some of these guys, and that seems about right. I think the Giants were just in a spot of like, we can't walk into this, draft with just Tommy DeVito. We need to have at least somebody who's played games. And really, Jameis was one of the last names left that I think was in a position to say, I'm ready to sign and looking for an opportunity. So I see the Giants as it's a placeholder. If the draft doesn't work out the way they hoped, or maybe the quarterback they select in the draft doesn't accelerate fast enough, then he, certainly is going to start, I think, week one. If they get the player they're coveting in the draft, then I think that Jameis is going to be in a battle to start week one. I think it's going to be that simple. It also says to me that more than likely, it feels like as we read the tea leaves to the weekend, but more than likely, I think the Giants are moving to I don't think we're going to get Aaron Rodgers mindset. And what are we going to do next? Where I think, obviously Pittsburgh's got Mason Rudolph. They've got a player in their mind that's set. So both teams are kind of getting themselves in position to say, what if? But neither team, I'm sure, is sitting there patting themselves on the shoulder going, we've done a great job yet. So I think there's still some exploring to do for both clubs. But I just think Jameis is a placeholder, but not a bad one. Again, you may like him, you may not, but at least he's got a lot of experience.
I look at it the same way. And again, we've got examples of guys, I guess it might not be in the executive's eyes or the coach's eyes, but maybe more the media's eyes and the fan base's eyes. We go, oh, those guys are backups, like Geno Smith, like Baker Mayfield, like Sam Darnold. And those three examples, they've reframed that narrative, gotten second opportunities or third opportunities for some of those guys as well, and then taken the advantage of them. And now they feel like entrenched starters potentially in this league again. Is that road still available for Jameis, or is he truly at this stage? We know what he is, and he is a capable backup quarterback, but he's not going to be a Geno. He's not going to be a Baker, and he's not going to be a Sam Darnold.
Yeah, you wonder sometimes because, the reason why Tampa, I think, moved away from Jameis Winston is because he got part of the notorious club of the 30-30 club. What do I mean by that? 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions in one season is not the club you want to be in the National Football League, but that's Jameis, right? He is so fearless with the football. The one thing I remember, though, going to the Saints before he got banged up was, under Sean Payton, he looked like a different Jameis Winston. He actually was not throwing the ball, not throwing interceptions, and like, wow, that's the quarterback you're hoping for. Goes to Cleveland, you start to see the old Jameis Winston. So it just depends on where he decides in terms of risk, because he has the arm talent. He's got the knowledge. It's just that he's so risky with the football. Can you break that out of him? We'll see if Brian Daboll can do that. But I think there's still potential. I don't see the Baker Mayfield, but I didn't see Geno Smith become the player he's become, right? I think Baker, you said, well, maybe. Sam Darnold, that was a tough one. But this one, I think we've seen this guy along the way, a long ways. It's going to be hard to change him, but I still say there's been flashes of Jameis Winston that are really good.
It is astounding when you mention 30 for 30 that a starting quarterback in this day and age was allowed to throw 30 picks in one season. I mean, Mark, that's mind blowing. We're talking about guys with 4 or 5 picks in an entire season. He had 30. I don't know that we'll ever see that again in the history of the NFL, but you're right. How do you get that out of that guy? Because Baker had the same problem, maybe taking too many shots with his arm. Sam, certainly that was the turnover-prone problem in Carolina and certainly with the Jets before, and even Geno, but maybe not to that degree. Is there any way at this stage to coach that out of Jameis? Or again, as you say, he is who he is?
Yeah, so that's where I feel different. Like, I want to believe in Jameis Winston. I can see where the Giants are coming from. At least we can handle the ball. We know he's going to be able to run the system. But it is that daredevil, that fearless, that force the ball, make a play, that I don't know if that's going to disappear anymore because it's been ingrained so long and you got away with it for so long. And in college, you could get away with that even more because of the talent level in terms of the athletes and things like that. But at the pro level, because everything's a game of inches, guys are jumping on balls, guys are jumping on plays, and he's just pushing the ball and forcing it. I think it's going to be a hard thing for him to overcome. I don't think the Giants want him to be the starter week one, but we'll just wait and see. But at least the Giants got somebody on their team that's played, a 17-game season.
So you mentioned Aaron Rodgers, that this kind of signifies probably a pivot away from that if you're the Giants in that collective brain trust. Aaron is still without a team. He is 41 years old. You even alluded to it, I believe, on last week's GM Shuffle, that while the Steelers feel like the likely destination, as this gets protracted and prolonged, is there a chance he says, you know what? I don't know if I want to play football anymore. Is that still a real possibility?
I mean, I guess as every day ticks, it feels like it's got more of a chance, right? With the reports of him being in Pittsburgh and spending hours in the facility and being around people, you'd say, like, are you in or are you out? And so I don't know if it's, I was saying before, like, is it a leverage play to get more money? I don't think he needs to do that. He's earned a fortune in the National Football League. It's more of, is he coming to grips? Does he want to be there? And maybe for Aaron, he had to get to the building and kind of be around people, say, do I want to do this again? So I think he's just weigh in on that. I think now, maybe again, these are fun podcasts. Maybe in 3 days from now, 4 days, this is going to go wrong. But I think it's either the Pittsburgh Steelers or he's walking away from football. That's the way I feel like it's going right now. It just doesn't feel like the Giants are able to get the attention that where Aaron was spent day with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I haven't read that, heard that, or seen that coming. And so it feels like this is Steelers or bust, and it feels like that's the direction Aaron Rodgers is heading.
With those tentacles, and now with Jameis going there as the Giants, just potentially as the backup, as you mentioned, and with Aaron still not 100% committed, whether or not that changes or not in the next couple of days, who knows? What does this mean for Russell Wilson? Is he okay being, I don't want to say the leftovers, but if Rodgers does have this about face and says, I don't want to play, can the Steelers really go back to Russ? Is that like, is Russ at a stage of his career goes, okay, I understand it. You were trying to get the guy. And if I'm the plan B, I'm okay with being that. Is that okay for Russell Wilson?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think Russell's ego would let him do that. I have a feeling Russ is in the same kind of situation where I think he's just kind of like, what do I want to do now? Do I still want to do this? And at what capacity? I mean, he's taken visits, as we've seen, but I think Russell Wilson's kind of in limbo. And, I think this draft class is confusing everybody. I think as we watch these, it gets closer and closer. Where do we rank these top 3 quarterbacks, and what order do you actually have them in? Because I think that's really the debate that's going on in the Giants. That's the debate that's obviously going on in Cleveland. And that's why I think the Steelers are the front runner for Aaron Rodgers, because they have the least control over what's going to happen at that position. So, all those things being said, it feels like Russell's in a tough spot because everybody's kind of passed, and maybe it's the money or things like that. But I will say this, and like it or not, I think I'd rather have Jameis Winston 2 for 8 than Justin Fields 2 for 40.
Woo! I think I'm right there with it. 2 for 8 versus 2 for 40. Like Justin Fields a lot. Don't know if I like him at that price point, but that's what the Jets have right now. And certainly the Giants may be going on the cheap a little bit until they figure out who their potential future number 1 starter could be. So much more to get to. When we come back, I do want to get to some other news and notes around the league, including San Francisco. Mark, they say there's a plan. We'll figure out what that plan is. It's next here on the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
We are back on the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings. Dave Ross, Mark Dominik here with you. And Mark, we hear from John Lynch in San Francisco, and I'm sure there's some consternation out there in the Bay. What are we doing? What's the plan? We're getting rid of everybody, and Debo is gone, and what are we going to do with our quarterback and Brock Purdy? How much are we going to pay him? John Lynch said this, and I want to quote. He said, we've got a little thing called the draft, and we've got a lot of picks. And I think the thing the fans should know is that we have a plan. We're going to execute that plan, and we're excited about the opportunity. Sound a little defiant in that. I kind of like it. The Niners, by the way, do have 11 picks coming up in April's draft. So is that kind of a way to say to the fan base, hey, we get it. You're concerned about what the future looks like, but we're excited about the opportunity to build through this draft. Is that what you're picking up from John Lynch?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously a lot of 49ers have departed, whether that's Aaron Banks for $77 million up in Green Bay, whether it's Drake Greenlaw or Ofenga who go to Denver, Debo Samuel gets traded, other players that are not on that roster anymore. That is just attrition, and that is life in the National Football League. And you're going to have to trust John Lynch, obviously Coach Shanahan, and what they can do with these draft picks. Again, the guys I just mentioned, they basically drafted almost every one of those guys in the first place. So they've been able to find those type of players before. They're going to have to go do that again. But the big thing here is that they understand that they're budgeting, right? They're looking at this thing holistically long-term and not just 2025. So what does that mean? We all know Brock Purdy is going to sign. It's only a matter of when, not if. And it's going to be at least in the 50s. Earlier, I'd say like a month or two ago, I'd have said, hey, look, I think 45 to 50 seems fair. That's out the door. That's gone. So now I think it's going to be more like, is it going to be the 55 or is it going to hunt up to 60? It's going to be closer in that range. It's going to be more that 50 that I thought it could be, just because I think Brock Purdy is probably going to get that 55 now, just kind of based off of everything it feels like. Either way, now this team has to figure out, okay, how do I put a whole team together? And that's where I think you saw. That's why Debo Samuel isn't there. That's why, they did Brandon Ayuk. but you only have so many guys you can pay, and you can't pay Drake Greenlaw and pay Fred Warner. You can't pay two linebackers when you're playing this game. It's hard to pay, your tackles and your guards in this game. And so you've got to make big decisions. And so they've gone, hey, look, we're paying Ayuk, we're playing the tight end, we're paying the running back, but we're going to have the Ricky Pearsalls. We're going to have a younger offensive lineman. We can't afford to buy everybody once we got Brock Purdy on a big deal. And that's the plan I think John's talking about is we're going to get this quarterback settled. We're going to get this set. We're going to build this team around Brock. But we're going to have to do it with draft picks because that's what teams have to do once you start investing in that position.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I look at it and I go, I'm going to trust John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan right now to figure out the direction of this football team, if it's going to be built through that draft. I know like the CMC trade was the big one, but most of those guys that you're talking about, they drafted those guys like the Devos and the Ayuk. So they've got a pretty good track record there of hitting on those picks. One of the news and notes segment here from the NFC, Brandon Cooks is leaving Dallas. He's going to be in New Orleans now, 2-year deal, $13 million deal with the Saints. What do we make of that move? This a slot guy now, kind of his advancing age here, reliable receiver, but I always feel like he's been so well traveled. What do you make of this news for the Saints?
It is amazing, right? Brandon Cooks is like the best player that can't seem to find a home long term, right? It's just bizarre. He's moved, but he's been paid just about everywhere he goes. I think this is a two-way. Number one, obviously Chris Olave, he's a huge piece of the puzzle, and it was a devastating injury for him last year to miss the season, basically. And I think they wanted to protect themselves, but also, to your point, I think they're looking at Cooks as being a vertical presence, a guy that's being a slot, a guy that they're comfortable with and know. And so I think it's a nice fit for the Saints, who I think are looking for a couple more weapons, and this was an easy one to get, especially, at that price around $13 million. I think it's a win-win for the Saints. I think it's a win for Brandon Cooks. He's comfortable in the building, and I think he'll be very comfortable with Derek Carr.
Let's break down this. We'll do the NFC here in this segment, and then later on in the program, we'll get to the AFC. But let's stay in the South here with the Saints, and now kind of going that veteran route, it looks like, obviously, with Derek Carr, and you're still going to have 41 running the rock with Alvin Kamara. Now you're bringing a guy like Brandon Cooks. It feels like they're kind of going the old way, if you will, with the Saints. And then the Falcons now, turning it over to Michael Penix. I know that, KC8's still going to be there as the backup. They're kind of going the young route. Carolina's already gone the young route. And Tampa Bay, quiet as kept, they're kind of now the new standard in the division. How do you break down this South top to bottom?
Yeah, I thought it'd be good for us to kind of sit here and go, okay, now that free agency's over, how do we rank these teams? And I thought, it'd be good to do it today. We'll rank the AFC and NFC, and then we'll do it again after the draft and say, what had really changed from the, prior to the draft to post-draft, and what kind of order does it really, materially affect? So in the NFC, when the South, I'm kind of with you, Dave. I think it's Tampa Bay's division right now. They've obviously showed it for a couple of years in a row. They keep making the postseason. They keep the guys like Chris Godwin on the team. They had a good draft class last year. I just don't see anything to unseat them based off of knowing that they still got some work to do on the defensive side of the ball. But I really like what they are offensively, and I think that's going to make them a really tough team to knock off that pedestal. So I got Tampa number one. I'm going with the Saints as number two. I know it's a new coach. I know it's still Derek Carr, but I just feel like the Saints, and I do this all the time. I always pick the Saints and they always disappoint me, but I just feel like the Saints are probably a little bit more of a complete team. And I think if they got the Brandon Cooks like they do, and if they get Olave back, I think there's enough weapons there to say, wait a second, this guy might score a lot more than you think. And now with Kellen Moore, I think that the whole thing might just work out a little better. So I'm going Saints 2. I'm going to pop Atlanta in the third spot. I think there's still some growing pains that I think they're going to go through. And I think defensively, they still got a lot of work to do. Obviously had Jimmy Lake last year as the defensive coordinator. They fired him. They got a new defensive coordinator this year. So I'm going to take the Atlanta Falcons 3 and put the Carolina Panthers still in progress as 4.
Interesting, because I'm looking at Penix. I can't wait to see what he becomes. But you're right. Do you really trust that to go all the way to the top spot? Oh, so close to making the postseason last year. Didn't get it done. I like that Saints pick, too, for you. I think that's sneaky. Maybe going the old man route there, if you will, but still some trusted players, at least in years past, if you can get those guys to play at that level. We mentioned the NFC West here with the Niners. They are the favorites in the betting market still to win this division, but I look at the other teams like, oh, man, the Rams feel like they're coming. We saw what they did in the postseason last year. I know the Niners were all banged up. And then Seattle with some turnover there at the wide receiver position, and maybe the Cardinals, we'll see what they look like. What do they look like in your eyes pre-draft?
Yeah, this is tough. I think when I took all 8 divisions and you try to break them down, I think this is the hardest division to do. I actually do. I think it's like I think Arizona's better than people realize. I think Seattle took a big shot with Sam Darnold, but it's a 1-year deal. They can walk out of it if they want to after 1 year, or they can just be like, hey, we got that right. We Baker Mayfield this thing into another quarterback, which would be great for Seattle fans. And then you see San Francisco in the turnover and what we just talked about the plan. And then you got the Rams who still have Mr. Matt Stafford, who's, looked like a spring chicken last year. So in terms of breaking these guys down, I don't have the 49ers as number one right now. I still have the Rams as the number one team in this division. And I think that because the wide receiver room is so good right now, and also with Matt Stafford being back, and I think that they still have a draft class where they may pick a first-round player again. So it might be actually fun for the Rams to, back-to-back years of actually drafting first-round players when they didn't do that forever. So I've got the Rams as the number one team. I think they're the team to beat in that division. Then it gets, I'm going to put San Francisco because I believe in Brock Purdy, and I believe in Ricky Pierce. I believe in Kenny, George Kittle, Brendan Ayuk. I mean, think about all the different weapons they have. I just think they're going to be very good offensively. So I've got San Francisco number 2. I've got Arizona as number 3.
Ooh.
And don't like, again, what Seattle's doing, but they are going through a big turnover in that roster. And so I'm going to put Seattle 4th right now. Not sure what I'm going to get out of Sam Darnold, but I feel like Arizona is going to take one more step this year and be very competitive, a tough out for any team that plays them.
We saw how tough the NFC North was, specifically with the Lions and the Vikings right down to the last week of the regular season. Incredible regular season for the Vikings. We know how good the Packers are as a playoff team there. The Bears are the team that are trying to get on that level. Is it still the Lions division to lose, Mark, or the other teams in that rearview mirror really closer than the objects might appear?
You know what? I'm going to keep the Lions there because of, some of those injuries we saw on the defensive side last year. Obviously you can't control injuries. You hope to minimize them. But I think if Detroit had Aiden all season long, I think it's a different season, maybe even for Detroit. Offensively, they're a juggernaut as well. It's hard to knock Detroit out of that. I think you're going to have to prove to me that they're not good enough before I just pull them out of that situation. As much as I like this division as well, I keep Detroit at number 1. Number 2, Green Bay Packers. I just think that it's a young football team across the board. I think they're getting more and more experience. I think they're just getting better. So I feel really good about where Green Bay's sitting right now. And I think Jordan Love will come back and have a really quality season this 2025 season. So I like the Packers as a postseason type of team right now, again, prior to the draft, but through what they've done in free agency, very pointed in free agency and what they've accomplished. I've got Minnesota 3, and it was a close one. Now, again, this team won so many games last year. You're like, wait a second, how can you do that? How you just have them 3? But I feel like that's still good if they end up third seed in this division. It could be 9-8. It could be 10-7 kind of a season. But I think they're a good team. But again, they're going to have a rookie quarterback, and we have to watch that unfold and develop during the whole season to see what does that really look like for a whole season for this football team. But I like Minnesota. I got them 3rd, and that puts Chicago still stuck at 4th. And, I want to see Caleb Williams take a step. I do feel like that roster is certainly turned over. We talked about this last week. I think they were one of the best teams in terms of what they've done on the offensive line has been outstanding, I think, for this team. But it's still in a division with those other teams. I'm going to keep the Bears 4th. They're going to have to prove me wrong.
I think you're right. I love the order, and I don't disagree with any of that pecking order pre-draft here. I saved the best for last, and that means the world champion Philadelphia Eagles is a Cowboy backer. It pains me to say that, but they are the team everybody's gunning for. We saw the strides that the Commanders made in year 1 with Jaden Daniels and Dan Quinn. I don't know what the Giants are doing. I don't know what my Cowboys are doing. Mark, is it as simple as that for 1, 2, 3, 4 in this division?
Dave, I went out on a limb here. I went to Dallas as number 1.
Oh!
I didn't, Dave.
Oh!
I'm just kidding.
You got me.
Oh, Dave, I can't do that to you. It's not Dallas. I just wanted to see that reaction. Sorry about that. No, look, I'm going with the Philadelphia Eagles. I have to go with the Philadelphia Eagles. You look at what they've been able to do, what they were able to do last year with Saquon Barkley, getting Saquon Barkley back. Yes, they've lost some pieces on defense, but they're still very, very good football team, and they've been so consistent in the draft. You look over the last 4 years, I think they've been home runs on their first and second round pick every year. So it's hard not to go with the Philadelphia Eagles. I am buying the Washington Commanders. I believe in what they did last year. I like what they've done this year in terms of the offensive line, in terms of obviously Deebo Samuel, and still have the draft class in front of them. And Jaden Daniels, I think, is just that good. Dave, I still got your Cowboys 3rd. I still believe, and I know that I think they're going to do it, and they always kind of let me down and all those things, but I still like the Cowboys and overall what that football team is. And now with the Giants, Jameis Winston's your top quarterback right now. Without for anything else, how are you nothing but 4th? You have to be 4th, so that's why I've got the Giants last.
You got me so good, Mark. I cannot believe I fell for the okie doke on that one, but you set me up perfectly and knocked me right back down to 3rd place where we probably should be right now in the NFC East. Well done, my friend. When we come back, going to break down the AFC and some coaching news in the collegiate ranks. That's next here on the GM Show.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
We continue the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings. Dave Ross, alongside our GM here at VSiN, Mark Dominik. And Mark, this is very interesting news that I heard this week about Ron Rivera, of course, the former head coach in Carolina and former head coach most recently of the Washington Commanders. And now he's going to be the GM of the Cal Bears, and going back to his alma mater. And obviously we know this, Michael Lombardi, of course, here in the GM Shuffle before you and I. And now Michael has become kind of the first ever GM of college football, right? And now we're seeing Ron Rivera go to California and do that. What do we make of this trend now that with NIL, the changing landscape of college football, which does seem to mirror more of the NFL model? Is this the way it's going to be now with GMs in college football? And what are those challenges going to be like for a Ron Rivera, for a Michael Lombardi, now doing it on the collegiate ranks?
Well, it was already hard enough. It's a very hard job. It is very hard to set up a board. It's, frustrating that there's so much that goes on in the portal. It's hard to build a roster. It used to be you get the commitment, you got a commitment. But this is going to be the new norm. This is what's going to happen. Notre Dame hired a guy that I hired a long time ago in Tampa Bay named Mike Martin. He's going to join. He's the GM now for Notre Dame. I think of Jim Nagy. If you know his name, it's from the Senior Bowl, but a long time, in the National Football League. He's at Oklahoma. Nick Polk is a guy that's at the University of Florida now. He was a longtime executive for the Atlanta Falcons. And you got the Ron Rivera. You think Andrew Luck, he's at Stanford as the GM. So now you've got, Ron Rivera. So, a lot of these guys have a lot of experience in the football NFL world. Luck's the only one that's like a former player that really never spent any time in a front office, but the other ones all have. And I think they're seeing it from this perspective. They're trying to take some of the weight off these coaches. They have nonstop schedules in college right now. And I know that there's always going to be that separation a little bit between, well, I'm the head coach of the football team. I want to run the football program. We're still going to let you pick the player. It's kind of like the draft, right? But the same thing here is coaches had no way of breathing because it was so busy. They're always talking to the next guy, trying to keep their own guys, everything like that. This takes some of that weight off of them, and it has become such a big business. And we see what kind of money everything's driving right now. So it makes logical sense that these clubs that are in the bigger programs are going to have this kind of situation where they're going to need somebody to kind of run the whole board and make sure that the players are getting evaluated correctly and your board is getting stacked correctly. So I think it's a trend we're going to continue to see. I think it's just going to happen with the big teams. The A&Ms, Texas's, Michigan's, as we know, Ohio State. They're all going to have this kind of a program, Alabama's. But it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard on the middle tier teams, the teams that maybe the Central Missouri or, Michigan, Western Michigan. I think that's going to be really tough. And I think you see this is going to sadly happen in NCAA basketball, where I think more and more the Cinderella teams aren't going to be Cinderella teams anymore because these kids can all move around and get to the best programs, even if they have one good year at McNeese or one good year at Yale. They can now go to, hey, I'm going to go to Kansas, or I'm going to go to Arizona or something like that. So sadly, I think we're going to see this a lot. But for football, I think this is the new norm. I think you're going to see more and more names that you kind of recognize that jump back in that college game because the pay is also fairly significant for some of these people as well.
Well, I one name that I know is certainly a guy I'm talking to right now, Mark Dominik. So your alma mater, Rock Chalk Jayhawk. Like, would that be something that would be enticing to you? Or is it like, well, I'm an NFL exec, and it's not that you're going, like, I'm sure that Michael Lombardi, Bill Belichick, they don't look at it as a step down. They look at it as a new challenge. What about for you? Let's just say theoretically, Rock Chalk wanted your services to come back to your alma mater. How challenging and different do you think that would be for you? And is that something you'd like?
Well, I get exactly what Ron Rivera is doing. To me, I think that's kind of the ultimate job, is to be able to go back to your alma mater and do that job at that position. So, I mean, that would be, kind of almost like a really great situation. I think if it ever opened up and if it was that kind of the timing and everything, or else if not, then let me know if Vanderbilt's hiring, since I'm here in Nashville. I'll see what the Concourse want to do. But, and I mean, I think it's enticing, and I don't think it's easy. I think it is a challenge, and I think Lombardi is going to press, and I think it's going to be hard for Mike. This is nothing easy about what he's doing, especially at Carolina, where it's already such a highly regarded school in terms of education too. So it's tough to get some of those kids through the door, let alone keep them in the door or recruit them, because everybody else is recruiting them too. Everybody else is saying the same things that you're trying to say. We'll see what they can do in North Carolina, but I do think it's a good challenge for anybody who tries to take one of these jobs on.
I think he'd be fantastic, but I don't want to lose another GM just like that. Like we already lost Michael. I don't want to lose you too. But that's what happens when you work with talented people. Let's get back to the AFC here. And you look at the AFC East and you see Josh Allen now. He gets the bag. They did do I think, pretty good job of re-signing their own guys, if you will, in Buffalo. They are right now the team to beat in that division. Have the Jets, Dolphins, Patriots, any of those teams you think close the gap at all?
Yeah, no more playing games or joking with you. This is the Buffalo Bills. There's no way I'm going to put any Buffalo at the number one here. And I really, like we talked about before, I thought free agency, they really took care of their own guys. And I think that's a big statement, let alone for Buffalo. But then, the moves they've made, and now Bosa being there too, and if they can get a healthy season out of him, what impact he'll have for this team as well. So it's hard not to sit there and look at the Buffalo Bills, go, it's clearly Buffalo, number one. I'm keeping Miami at 2. It was close. I really didn't love their offseason. I thought it was very bland. Obviously, everything kind of hinges on Tua and whether he can make it out there for 17 games, what that looks like. But they're still extremely fast, extremely explosive, and they still have a draft class in front of them. And I just don't think the other teams have done enough to close any kind of gap. So I'm keeping the Dolphins at 2. I am moving Drake May and the Patriots to 3. I think Drake May is going to be better. I think Drake May is going to be fun to watch. I think the Patriots can take just about any player they want in the draft, except for a quarterback, with their first pick, and just about any pick, because I still think there's a lot of holes there on that roster. But I think that Elliott Wolf and company should be able to have a lot of fun in this draft class. So I think the Patriots are going to move past, yes, the Jets. I put the Jets 4th. I don't know what to say about the Jets that would give you more confidence, saying, I think it's going to be so much better. I know it's going to be different, but I don't know if it's going to be so much better right now that I look at it and go, again, usually, like, I lived in the world, as I've said this to you before, Dave, when I was in the NFC South as a GM, the quarterbacks were Cam Newton, Drew Brees, and Matt Ryan. And I had Josh Freeman. I still had the 4th best quarterback. And the Jets, to me, still have the 4th best quarterback in Justin Fields. And we'll see what Justin can do. And I have no angst against him at all. I just don't think that if the Steelers said no, the Bears said no, what makes you think it's going to work? Yes, there for $40 million. I just don't like the move, and that's why I put the Jets 4th.
I'm with it. 1 and 4 seem pretty clear cut. 2 and 3 might be the battle there in the AFC East, as you alluded to. How about the North? Because the Bengals, you hope that they're fully healthy, certainly offensively this year. We know the Ravens are the team to beat there. Steelers, we still don't know about the quarterback situation. Maybe the Browns feel like they might be a little bit away there. What do you make of the North top to bottom?
Yeah, it seems to me, without free agency being complete, which is why we're doing it right now, it seems like it's a 2-person race, right? It's either you've got the Bengals or you've got the Ravens and it's that close. And I was like, well, they had a lot of difference in wins last year, but those wins were a lot different. I'm going the Bengals number 1. I love what they did with the wide receivers. They got them both back. They got Joe Burrow. If they can get Trey Hendrickson, we'll see what happens. But I still like the Bengals, and I'm going to put them number 1 because I feel like down the line, and I think what they grew from last year, I think they're going to be a better team in 2025. And so as much as I think they're both playoff teams, I'm putting the Bengals first, and then I'm putting the Baltimore Ravens a close second. And I'm trying to figure out why I did that, other than I just feel like Joe Burrow is going to do something this year. He was so good last year, but I just feel like the Bengals team is going to finally get over the hump. Where I like the Ravens, I think there's just Mr. Consistency. They're there. They're going to be up there in that 11, 12 win total again, and certainly have a chance to host Lombardi, in my personal opinion. Then we take the drop, and that's where the Pittsburgh Steelers sit right now without a quarterback. You can have Mason Rudolph. They kind of like Mason Rudolph. He's a good player. Maybe he can pull a Brad Johnson, back to my old days with Tampa Bay and put together a really good season. But maybe not. And so I like their defense, but they still got things to do on the skill positions that I think they need to address, especially as a speedster tight end, as a full-time big running back. I think those are things besides the quarterback. And so I've got the Steelers as the 3rd team right now. We'll see after the draft whether they switch positions or not. And the 4th team is easily the Cleveland Browns. Could there be something in this bottle? Possibly. I just don't know who's going to, head this team for the whole season and throw the ball for them and be the leader and pick them up. Myles Garrett can't play quarterback. That's the problem. But, I've still got them, sadly, as the 4th team in the South.
I see it the same way. I love the pick of the Bengals right now to take a small step ahead of Baltimore next year. In the South, 2 for 2 with D'Amico Ryans and C.J. Stroud at quarterback. Do they make it 3 for 3 at least so far before the draft?
Yeah, they do for me. I don't know, again, how they don't. I know that, offensive line with Tunsil being gone, things like that, you're like, oh, well, wait a second. Those are some pretty good players. But I think that CJ Stroud and this team is too far ahead of everybody else. I do think Jacksonville can close some gap. I've got Jacksonville second team. I think that they're a better team now than they were last year at this time. I just feel like they're going to kind of come together and find out what's going to be the right mix for this football team. So I love Jacksonville too. I think they're going to be right on the bubble as a playoff team, actually. So I'm a little bullish more than I probably should be on Jacksonville. I got the Colts 3. We'll see what happens at the quarterback position there. And the Titans, sadly, without the draft, I don't know how you don't put the Titans 4th right now, because I just don't feel like they've got the right signal caller under center.
Yeah, I don't see any differences there in that division, top to bottom as well. But I like the fact you like Jacksonville to be able to close it a little bit here, make that a little bit more of a push for H-Town this year. In the West, you're still trying to beat Patrick Mahomes, and they still haven't beat that combination of Mahomes and Reed. As long as they've been quarterback, head coach, they've won this division every year. They've had that hierarchy. Do they do it again, or could the Denvers or the Chargers of the world really push them?
Not the Raiders? You're not going to include the Raiders?
I'm not putting them up there.
Hey, you're the one living there. You got to deal with that. I mean, how do you not put Kansas City? As much as you might love Denver and you might love the Chargers, Kansas City's owned this thing for years. It's 7 years in a row. Like, you have to put the Kansas City building. Somebody knocks them off. So easily Kansas City stays there. The offensive line is going to take some work. That's going to be something to watch this year. So I think they're a little more kryptonite around them, but I still got Kansas City 1. I'm going to go with Justin Herbert. I'm going to go with the Chargers. Last year, I thought they were going to even be better than they were, but I believe that the Chargers are going to continue to improve as a football team overall under Harbaugh. So I'm going to go with the Chargers as the number 2 team. I will absolutely stick with the Denver Broncos in what they look like and what they feel like they became last year, and let them have another draft. But, the building blocks seem like they're there, and another year with Sean in the same system for Bo Nix. I think that should be really fun to watch. You should get them very competitive all through the season. And right now, the Raiders are last. I mean, I know it's Geno Smith. He's got a lot of experience, and Aiden O'Connell, young guy that really hasn't played a lot. But again, if you're just going to pick the quarterbacks in that division, you're going to pick Geno 4th, and that's where I'm going to rank them right now. We'll see what the draft can do. They obviously had a really good draft last year, but I'll see what the draft can do this year for the Raiders to see if they can move anywhere. But right now, they're pre-seeded in that 4th spot.
Speaking of the draft, when we come back, we will continue to build that board. That is next here on the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
We continue the GM Shuffle presented by DraftKings. Dave Ross and our GM, Mark Dominik, here with you on this Monday. Mark, we can't wait. It's almost getting to that time of the year for the NFL draft. And right now, let's continue to build that board.
Mark Dominik breaks down the draft class on Building the Board.
All right, so Mark, without further ado, we've been doing this here for the better part of a month to get ready for the NFL draft next month. As you build that board for wide receivers, I'm curious what you see there. And obviously, when we look at the Heisman Trophy winner, Travis Hunter, we go, well, wait a minute, is that a wide receiver? Is that a corner? Does he make your list, or how do you look at a special player like that?
Yeah, Hunter, if you can remember, if you happen to listen back at the previous podcast where we broke him down, I have him as a corner first and a receiver second. I think if you draft Hunter, you draft him as a corner and you find packages for him from time to time at receiver. He can't play both ways in the National Football League. I don't think a player can do that at this level, the speed, the strength, everything like that. So I kept him out of this list, but he would be the number 1 receiver. So if I just had him at receiver, I'd put him at receiver, but I put him at corner and still think he's one of the best, 2 players in this entire draft class. He's a great player, and whoever gets him is going to be very fortunate. But I got the receivers here. I grabbed 4 receivers kind of to take a look at them. Matt Golden is one of them. Let's see. Ibuka is one of them. We've got Burden out of Missouri, and then we got T-Mac out of Arizona. Those are the 4 guys I want to break down. And I'll start with the one that most people have number 1 on their board, And we'll break them down when we're done, but T-Mac is the one, right? He's the guy that everybody loves. Arizona's athletic, very athletic wide receiver, huge frame, long and lanky. There's a couple guys that if you really like him, there's a couple guys you go right to when you start to watch him on tape because of the way he has such an amazing catch radius. And what that means is obviously he can catch the ball way away from his body and is very comfortable with his hands. He's got elite hand-eye coordination, and again, the catch radius. There's two players. If you like him, you think, well, he's Mike Evans-ish, or he's Randy Moss. Like, those are unbelievable statements to me to make, but they're just the way he kind of runs, he's like that. But where he's not is he does not have their strength in the lower body. Those two guys have better lower body strength than T-Mac has. I like T-Mac a lot. I think he's a really, really good receiver, but I do worry that he might be more Drake London than he will be the, Mike Evans kind of a player in the National Football League. He ran really well at his pro day, 4.48 if I'm not mistaken, so that was an important part. But I've got him as a 1.5. Again, the rankings, if you're a 1-0, that means it's like a 1 to 10. If you're a 1.5, it's somewhere between 11 and 21. And if you're a 1.9, you're 22 to 32. So I think he's more of like that 1.5 early, like 10th, 11th, 12th pick in the draft. A lot of people I see as high as 4, 5, or 6. It feels a little rich to me for him.
Very interesting the way you break these down, and I love the rating system here as well. You mentioned Luther Burden there at Missouri. And I know from our old buddies, Tyler Fulgham there at ESPN and Michael Kim, I call those guys the Mizzou Mafia. And they've been telling me about Burden for years. So I've heard a lot about the kid watching play at Mizzou. What do you see for him next level? And is he a lock first-round pick to you?
Yes, he is an absolute lock first-round pick to me. I think there's no debate about it. He ran a 4.41, which was very important for him as well. He's got a really nice frame. I think what he does is he accelerates so quickly in his routes, or as soon as the ball touches his hands, he's got instant acceleration. And that is such a critical trait for wide receivers. Watch that as you break him down. The ability for him to turn the ball upfield and just run. He can outrun you. He can run. He's got great, I think in terms of instinctive runners, he's the most instinctive of all these receivers in terms of where the little holes might be, the little creases, where to go with the ball, take away angles. He's got unbelievable run after catch instincts. And I think that's really separates his game. I think it's what's going to make him a special player at the National Football League. You can kind of think of like a Deebo Samuel, but I think he's smarter, faster, but he's kind of that way where you're like, just get him the ball in his hands, let him go do stuff. I think he's excellent. I think he's, they call him LB3. I think he's wide receiver 1. I think this guy should be the first receiver that comes off the board. In my personal opinion, and just watching him, I have him as a 1.0. I think he could come off the board. We'll see how these guys play out. But I love his frame. I love his game. I love his strength. I love the way he catches the ball. I don't see the downside in this guy. I think he's got elite talent across the board.
LB3. I like that. Ohio State feels like, wide receiver Mika Egbuka is going to be another guy that we're going to look at on this board too. Tell me about him, and is he a comp with some of these other talented Ohio State receivers that have come out the last couple of years?
There have been, haven't there? I mean, it's just been a machine. Keeps dropping guys in the first round or second round we've seen over the last couple of years. And I think Egbuka kind of falls in that same role. I really like Egbuka. You can put him just about anywhere. He's one of those guys where you can line him up and hand him the ball. You can do toss sweeps with him, but you can also put him in the slot. And you can also put him out in perimeter. So I think Egbuka does so many different things. It makes him a very good player for just about any system. I really like his toughness. That's probably the thing that really stands out to me. Again, he catches the ball. None of these guys I really worry about droppers, or else I wouldn't put them in the first round. So all these guys I think have really strong hands. I don't think dropping the ball is going to be an issue for him, but I love his toughness, and he's got quick twitch to him. Like in terms of like his route running and his ability to kind of separate a little bit are really, really good. But again, I like the different spaces I can use him on an offense. And so good size, solid frame, quick twitch, tough, catches the ball, different spots. I think he's a first rounder. He was close, but I got him as a 1.9. I don't think he goes in the teens, but I think he should go in the 20s. There's a pretty good drop off at wide receiver this year. So if you want one, you're probably going to want to take one of these 4 guys probably in the first round. I like Egbuka, but I've got him lower in the first.
You mentioned McMillan too, out of Arizona there, T-Mac. So out of those first 3 that you've broken down, so far that the highest grade you're giving is going to be on LB3. Is he going to be one out of this group so far?
Yeah, that's exactly the way I see it so far. So I've got LB3 as number one, the T-Mac as number two, and then Ibuka is the third receiver out of these guys that we're kind of working through. But I think LB3, just again, because I think he's got so many traits that are just definingly better than expected or
Mm.
higher on the board. And I give a lot, Dave, to functional football strength. And what that means is as you're watching tape or fans are watching players or getting ready for their draft and kind of watching guys breaking guys down. The one thing about like LB3 is that every time he's tackled, watch, he always just falling forward. And the one thing about T-Mac is he doesn't always fall forward and he doesn't break a lot of tackles. Where Ibuka, Golden, certainly Burden, those guys break a lot of tackles. Where T-Mac, he's going to go high point the ball and make great catches. He's not a coward. He's just not real strong. Again, he is 6'5", he's lengthy, so it's not easy to be as athletic there. But Randy Moss had that trait, right? He had the ability to kind of break some tackles, even though he was really skinny. He still had functional strength. That's the thing that's different. But LB3 certainly has that strength that I love when you watch him because he breaks so many tackles and that's so many hidden yards in a football game.
Yeah, you fall forward. That's 2 yards right there. So that could be the difference in a first down, new set of downs, as we all know how important that is. Golden, you mentioned that he's going to be your fourth receiver out of this top four?
Yeah, he's going to be in the four receivers, but he is actually going to be the third receiver. I've actually got him number three, just above Ibuka, where I've got Matt Golden. Those two are right neck and neck. And the reason why I like Matt Golden is, number one, he runs really well, even better than I thought. But the thing that's unique about him is I think this class, I talked about Luther having the best vision in terms of run after the catch, talked about the toughness in Ibuka, talked about the catch radius for T-Mac. Matt Golden runs the best routes. He is the best route runner of these four, my personal opinion. It's close. Luther's close, but Golden just has a really good knack of exactly where to cut. And you know exactly where he's going to be every time on the field. Like if it's 18 and a half yards, he's going to be 18 and a half yards. That's the way he runs routes, is he's very polished that way. And he's a very smart player too. You can see that he understands like zone coverages, finding the zone holes, setting down, or he knows when he's got to turn it up a little bit and speed deep. I wish he was maybe a little bit bigger or, that kind of thing. But I like Matt Golden. I think you're getting a very good player here. I don't think it's Zay Jones good, but I think it's really good. Where you see what you get. Zay Flowers, excuse me. I think it's Zay Flowers good, really good football player. But I think he's a first rounder. I've got him as a 1-9 also. So I've kind of got these guys lined up a little bit. I've got Luther Broughton is number one. Burden is number one. T-Mac I have number two. Then I've got Matt Golden is my number three. And Ibuka is 4, and I have them all in the first round. We've graded other positions, other players. I'm like, he's not quite a first rounder. I think these 4 are first rounders. I think they all go in the first round. But we got 2 tight ends to break down too.
Yeah, we do. And by the way, back to Golden for 1 second. I love guys that where they're supposed to be when they're going to be there. I think of Amari Cooper, like whether Amari is the fastest blazer or not, you just know pinpoint accuracy on his route running. You know how important that is for executives and certainly coaches and quarterbacks. Let's get to those tight ends because it's a new day and age in tight end, right? Do either one of these guys block, or are we just talking about pass catchers here?
No, actually both can block. But I think Tyler Warren, Penn State, is kind of that complete package. He can block, but he can also line up a quarterback, as we've seen. He can run the football very easily. He runs really good routes. He's got excellent soft hands. I don't know what he doesn't do well. He creates mismatches a lot in the college game, and you can see him. He's got vertical speed to go down the field. He's excellent. I mean, he's one of these tight ends where I feel like he checks every box you want at the tight end position: size, strength, toughness, hands, flexibility, athleticism, route running. It just check. I just feel really good about where Tyler Warren is. That last year I was a huge Brock Bowers fan. I thought he should have even gone earlier than he did. This year, I am a big Tyler Warren fan. I think he's a first-round count, obviously. I think he's a top 10 tight end. Like, I think he goes in the top 10. I think he's that good. And I think teams that passed on the tight end last year that had a chance to take a Brock Bowers are like, we got another kind of chance. It's not Brock the same. I don't think he's as truly gifted as a freak athlete as Brock is, but I think he is absolutely, if you want to sit there and go, okay, is this guy a Kittle or a Kelsey? I think he's that kind of realm, but I think he's, willing to block it. So that's what sets him apart. So I love him. I'm putting him in the top 10. He's a 1.0.
One more running back, tight end. We got 1 minute to go here in the program. Who's the second one that makes your list?
Yeah, it's Colston Loveland out of Michigan. He's a stud too. This guy's really good. Great catch radius. He also can do everything in terms of I trust him at the line of scrimmage to block. He can do that, but he does have really good hands, and he's like the others. He's got that catch radius, and I trust throwing him the football, knowing he's going to come down with it. He's a great competitor. He's got the frame. He's got the size. He's got everything you're really looking for. Now, I have him as a 1.5, so I think he's going to go anywhere between 10 and 20, because I think as soon as these two guys come off the board, you might wait another entire round before you see the next tight end come off the board as a possibility. So I think if you want one, you got to be aggressive this year. So I think he's obviously a 1.5 and a very good tight end to be happy to have on draft day.
And that, my friends, is how you build a board. Mark, great stuff, man. As always, every Monday, look forward to the conversation. Can't wait as we get closer and closer to April's draft. Thanks for listening, everybody, to the GM Shuffle. We'll see you next week.